Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Earth vessel Vanguard, watching the stars streak past through the viewport. 3 years had passed since humans first made contact with the Galactic Coalition. 3 years of careful diplomacy and slow progress. Today, he was escorting Ambassador Lisa Carter to what could be the most important trade meeting in human history. The Galactic Coalition was massive. 47 different species spread across thousands of worlds. They had technology that made human science look primitive, faster than light travel, energy weapons, medical treatments that could heal almost any injury, but they wanted something from Earth too. Raw materials, unique elements, and something they called creative thinking. Captain, called Lieutenant Sam Johnson from his station. We're approaching the Kepler 442b system. The diplomatic station is sending clearance codes. Morrison nodded. Take us in, Lieutenant. Nice and easy. Ambassador Carter joined him at the viewport. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had spent months preparing for this meeting. The coalition representatives seem excited about the possibilities, she said. They've never encountered a species quite like us. What do you mean? Morrison asked. Well, most of their member species evolved from prey animals. Herbivores. They developed their technology through cooperation and trade. They don't really understand competition the way we do. Carter paused. Their military is more like a police force. They handle pirates and smugglers, but they haven't fought a real war in over 2,000 years. Morrison found that hard to believe. No wars at all? None. They find the concept disturbing. When I mentioned human history, some of the diplomats actually became physically ill. Carter smiled slightly. They think we're fascinating but harmless. The diplomatic station came into view. It was enormous. A gleaming structure of metal and crystal floating in space. Ships from dozens of different species were docked around it. Morrison had never seen so many alien designs in one place. Impressive, he murmured. Commander Alex Turner approached from the security station. He was a tall man with military bearing, responsible for protecting the human delegation. Captain, I've been reviewing the station's security protocols. They're pretty basic. No armed guards, no weapon scanners, no defensive systems. They don't expect trouble, Carter explained. Violence is almost unknown in Coalition space. Turner frowned. Almost unknown isn't the same as never happening. The Vanguard docked smoothly with the station. Morrison watched as his crew prepared to disembark. The human delegation was small. Carter, Turner, 6 security personnel, and a handful of technical advisors. They were vastly outnumbered by the alien representatives waiting to meet them. The station's interior was beautiful. High ceilings, flowing architecture, gardens growing in artificial sunlight. Hundreds of beings from different worlds walked the corridors in peaceful coexistence. Morrison saw the bird-like ethons with their colorful feathers, the aquatic nereids in their mobility suits, and dozens of other species he couldn't identify. Admiral Zeftai of the Ethon Navy greeted them at the airlock. He was tall and graceful, with golden feathers that shimmered when he moved. Welcome, humans. We are honored by your presence. Carter stepped forward. Thank you, Admiral. We're looking forward to productive discussions. The first day of meetings went well. The Coalition wanted rare Earth elements and certain biological compounds that were common on Earth, but rare elsewhere. In return, they offered medical technology and educational exchanges. Both sides seemed pleased with the progress. Turner kept his security team alert but relaxed. The station was peaceful, exactly as advertised. The Coalition's security forces were polite and professional, but Turner noticed they carried only non-lethal weapons. Stun devices, restraint tools, nothing designed to kill. On the second day, everything changed. Turner was reviewing security reports when his communicator buzzed. Commander, this is Sergeant Lopez. We're picking up multiple ships approaching the station. They're not responding to hails. Turner rushed to the security center. The tactical display showed 20 ships moving toward the station at high speed. They were sleek and predatory-looking, nothing like the peaceful vessels of the Coalition. Those are hegemony ships, Admiral Zeftai said, his feathers ruffling with anxiety. They're separatists, extremists who reject Coalition membership. Are they hostile? Turner asked. They've made threats before, but they've never actually... Zeftai's words were cut off as the station shuddered. Explosions bloomed along the outer hull. Alarms began wailing. The lights flickered and emergency systems activated. Through the viewports, Turner could see Coalition defense ships moving to intercept the attackers. but their response was hesitant, uncertain. They're not fighting back effectively, Turner realized with growing horror. The coalition ships were larger and better armed, but they fought like they were trying to arrest criminals, not repel invaders. They used minimum force, targeted engines and weapon systems, tried to disable rather than destroy. The hegemony ship showed no such restraint. Within an hour, half the coalition defense force was destroyed or disabled. The hegemony ships moved in closer, targeting the station itself. Turner gathered his small security team, 6 men and women with basic weapons facing an enemy that had just crushed a fleet. We need to get our people to the escape pods. But as they moved through the station, Turner saw the scope of the disaster. The hegemony had boarded the station. They were rounding up civilians, taking hostages. The coalition security forces were surrendering rather than risk civilian casualties. Turner made a decision that would change everything. We're not running. We're going to hold the diplomatic section and protect as many people as we can. Sir, Sergeant Lopez said quietly. There are 6 of us and hundreds of them. Then we make every shot count. Turner activated his communicator and sent a message to Captain Morrison on the Vanguard. Jake, get out of here. Head for Earth and tell them what happened. Alex, I'm not leaving you. That's an order, Captain. Someone needs to report this. Turner paused, watching hegemony soldiers advancing down the corridor. Tell them we need real soldiers. Not peacekeepers, soldiers. The communication cut off. Turner and his team took positions at a choke point, using furniture and debris to create a defensive position. Around them, hundreds of alien civilians huddled in terror. The first hegemony soldiers rounded the corner, weapons raised. They expected the same easy surrender they had gotten from everyone else on the station. Instead, they met disciplined fire from humans who understood what warfare really meant. Turner's team had trained for this. They knew how to fight, how to kill when necessary, how to protect the innocent even at the cost of their own lives. The hegemony advance stopped. For the first time in the battle, they had encountered real resistance. Turner spoke into his communicator one last time, broadcasting on all frequencies. This is Commander Alex Turner of Earth. The coalition is under attack. We're holding defensive positions, but we can't hold forever. Earth needs to know this isn't a police action anymore. We need real soldiers. The message reached the Vanguard just as Morrison's ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying news of humanity's first taste of galactic warfare back to Earth. Behind them, the battle for the diplomatic station continued, with 6 human soldiers showing the galaxy what professional warriors could do when everything was at stake. General Patricia Hayes stood in the Pentagon's Crisis Center, staring at the message that had just arrived from the Kepler 442b system. The words were simple, but their meaning was terrifying. The coalition was under attack. Commander Turner and his team were trapped on a diplomatic station, surrounded by enemies. How long since we received this transmission? Hayes asked. 18 hours, General, replied Colonel Danny Wright, her senior aide. Captain Morrison's ship just made it back to Earth. He's requesting immediate debriefing. Hayes nodded grimly. In 18 hours, Turner and his people were probably already dead. But if the coalition was really under attack, this was bigger than one battle. This could be the start of something that would drag Earth into a galactic war. Get Morrison in here, and contact the coalition embassy. Tell them we need to talk. An hour later, Captain Morrison stood before a room full of military officials and government representatives. His uniform was wrinkled and his face showed the strain of the past few days. He had barely slept during the journey back to Earth. The coalition defense forces couldn't handle the attack, Morrison reported. They fought like they were trying to arrest criminals, not stop an invasion. The hegemony ships just rolled right over them. What about their numbers? Asked Admiral Kevin Stone, commander of Earth's small space fleet. Don't they have thousands of ships? They do, but they're spread thin across the galaxy. And from what I saw, they don't know how to coordinate their forces. Each ship fought alone. No combined tactics, no mutual support. Morrison paused. Commander Turner said it perfectly. They need soldiers, not peacekeepers. The coalition ambassador arrived an hour later. Velnara was a nereid, an aquatic species, that needed a special mobility suit to function in Earth's atmosphere. Her voice came through the suit's speaker with electronic distortion. General Hayes, Velnara said, The Coalition formally requests military assistance from Earth. We will provide transportation and supplies for your forces. What kind of assistance are you looking for? Hayes asked carefully. Perhaps a few hundred peacekeepers? With your superior training, they should be able to help restore order. Hayes exchanged glances with Colonel Wright. The aliens still didn't understand what they were dealing with. Ambassador, how many hegemony forces are we talking about? Intelligence estimates suggest perhaps 50 to 100,000 troops across multiple systems. Wright leaned forward. And you think a few hundred humans can handle that? Well, yes. Your species has shown remarkable adaptability. Surely your peacekeeping forces are more effective than ours. Hayes made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. Ambassador, we're not sending peacekeepers. We're sending soldiers, real soldiers, and we're sending enough to do the job properly. 3 days later, the staging area at Luna Base looked like organized chaos. Colonel Wright supervised the loading of equipment that made the Coalition observers nervous. Main battle tanks, artillery systems, combat drones, and weapons designed for one purpose: winning wars. Sergeant Maya Lopez checked items off her manifest as power-armored soldiers loaded them onto transport ships. Each piece of equipment represented centuries of human military development, refined through countless conflicts. Colonel, Lopez said, the aliens keep asking why we need so much firepower. They seem to think we're overreacting. Wright watched as a squad of soldiers practiced urban combat techniques in the training facility. These weren't police officers or peacekeepers. They were professional warriors trained to fight and win against any enemy. They'll understand soon enough, Wright replied. Dr. Rachel Morgan, the expedition's xenobiologist, briefed the military leadership on what they were facing. She had studied every available report about the hegemony. They're unlike the other Coalition species, Morgan explained. Most Coalition members evolved from prey animals or peaceful herbivores. The hegemony comes from predators. They understand violence in a way their neighbors don't. What about their tactics? Wright asked. Brutal but simple. They overwhelm with numbers and firepower. No subtlety, no complex strategies. They fight more like an armed mob than an organized military. Morgan paused. The problem is, against an enemy that won't fight back effectively, simple tactics work fine. Admiral Stone's fleet prepared for departure. The Earth Warship Defender led a small formation of transport and support vessels. It wasn't a large force by human standards, but it represented more concentrated military power than the galaxy had seen in millennia. On the day of departure, Admiral Zeftai of the Coalition Navy met the human fleet at the staging area. The Ethan officer's feathers were ruffled with anxiety as he reviewed the human preparations. Surely, this level of intensity is unnecessary for a simple policing action, Zeftai asked Colonel Wright. Wright looked at the alien officer with eyes that had seen combat on 3 different worlds. Admiral, with respect, this isn't a policing action. Your people are in danger. Our people are in danger. When humans are in danger, we don't send police. We send soldiers. But the casualties, the destruction, will be minimized through superior tactics and training, Wright said firmly. Admiral, your species has had peace for 2,000 years. That's admirable. But peace isn't the natural state of the universe. It has to be maintained, and sometimes that means fighting for it. The fleet departed Earth's solar system with 3,000 professional soldiers and all the equipment they needed to wage modern warfare. As they entered hyperspace, Wright addressed his officers. Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to show the galaxy something it hasn't seen in 2 millennia. Professional military operations conducted by soldiers who know what they're doing. Wright's expression was grim. The Coalition thinks we're coming to help with a police action. They're wrong. We're going to war. During the week-long journey to Coalition space, the human forces prepared. Soldiers checked and rechecked their equipment. Officers studied intelligence reports and planned operations. Medical teams prepared for casualties. Captain Nicole Adams led the pilot training sessions, teaching Coalition observers how human aircraft operated. The aliens were amazed by the complexity and lethality of human military technology. Your fighters are so aggressive, observed a Nereid technical officer. They're designed to kill enemy aircraft and destroy ground targets, Adams replied matter-of-factly. That's what fighters do. But what about capturing prisoners? Minimizing collateral damage? Adams looked at the alien with patience born of long military service. Those are important considerations, but they come after we've established air superiority and protected our ground forces. You can't minimize casualties if you lose the war. The message traffic from the war zone grew worse each day. The hegemony had captured 3 more systems. Coalition defense forces were retreating everywhere. Civilian casualties were mounting as the invaders showed no mercy to non-combatants. But there was one piece of good news. Commander Turner's team was still holding their position on the diplomatic station. They had been joined by a handful of coalition security personnel who had learned from human example. The small force was tying down hundreds of hegemony troops. Turner's buying us time, Wright told his staff. When we arrive, we're going to make sure his sacrifice wasn't wasted. As the fleet approached the war zone, Admiral Stone addressed all personnel over the ship's communication system. We're about to enter combat against an enemy that has terrorized peaceful worlds and murdered innocent civilians. Our job is to stop them. We're going to use every advantage we have. Superior training, better equipment, and tactics they've never seen before. Stone paused, looking out at the stars that surrounded the fleet. The galaxy is about to learn what a human professional army really is. We're not just soldiers. We're the guardians of civilization. We're what stands between order and chaos. And we're very good at our job. The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of hegemony-occupied territory. Ahead lay the first real war the galaxy had seen in 2,000 years. Behind them was Earth, trusting them to protect human interests and honor their alliance with the Coalition. Colonel Wright stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching enemy contacts appear on the tactical display. Soon the shooting would start. The galaxy was about to get its first lesson in modern human warfare. The mining world of Zarian 7 looked peaceful from orbit, but Colonel Danny Wright knew better. Intelligence reports showed 50,000 hegemony troops on the surface, using the local population as slave labor. 3 coalition defense squadrons had already tried to retake the planet. All 3 had been destroyed or forced to retreat. It's a strong position, Wright observed, studying the tactical display. The enemy has fortified the main mining facilities in the spaceport. They're using the civilians as human shields. Captain Tony Garcia, serving as coalition liaison, shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The human officer had volunteered for the assignment after seeing what Turner's team had accomplished on the diplomatic station. Sir, the coalition commanders are requesting a meeting. They want to coordinate the assault with their remaining forces. Wright nodded. Set it up. But make it clear that human forces will lead this operation. The meeting took place aboard Admiral Zeftai's flagship. The Ethan commander looked exhausted, his normally bright feathers dulled with stress. Around the conference table sat officers from 6 different coalition species, all looking defeated. Colonel Wright, Zeftai began, we appreciate Earth's assistance. However, our previous attempts to retake Zarian 7 have failed because we cannot risk civilian casualties. The hegemony has positioned their forces throughout the civilian areas. How many civilians are we talking about? Wright asked. Approximately 2 million beings across the planet's 3 major cities. Wright studied the tactical map. The hegemony had made a smart choice from their perspective. They knew the coalition wouldn't attack if it meant civilian casualties. It was a strategy that had worked perfectly against enemies who valued every life. Admiral, have you considered a precision strike approach? Our weapons are not accurate enough to guarantee civilian safety. We've already lost too many innocents in this war. Wright looked around the table at the alien officers. They were good people trying to fight a war with one hand tied behind their backs. But good intentions wouldn't save those civilians or stop the hegemony. Admiral, with respect, precision is what human military forces do best. Give us 72 hours and we'll have this planet secured. The aliens looked skeptical. Zeftai's feathers ruffled with doubt. Colonel, our forces outnumbered the enemy 3-1 and we still failed. You have only 3,000 troops. Numbers don't win battles, Wright replied calmly. Training, coordination, and proper tactics do. 24 hours later, Lieutenant Sam Johnson led the first human units down to Zarian 7's surface. His armored reconnaissance teams moved like ghosts through the rugged terrain, invisible to enemy sensors. gathering intelligence on hegemony positions. Johnson crouched behind a rocky outcrop, watching a hegemony patrol through his scope. The enemy soldiers moved carelessly, confident in their numerical superiority. They had no idea they were being watched. "Command, this is Recon 1, Johnson whispered into his communicator. "Enemy positions confirmed. They're not using proper security procedures. No overlapping fields of fire, no mobile reserves. They're sitting ducks." Back on the command ship, Wright smiled grimly as intelligence reports flowed in. The hegemony had made every mistake in the book. They were overconfident, poorly positioned, and completely unprepared for professional military operations. "Captain Adams," Wright called to his air support commander, "I want continuous air coverage over all 3 cities. Nothing moves without us knowing about it." Nicole Adams studied her flight plans. Human fighters would provide close air support while drones monitored every street and building. The hegemony wouldn't be able to move reinforcements without being detected and destroyed. "Yes, sir. We'll own the airspace within 6 hours." The attack began at dawn with precision artillery strikes on military targets. Human gunners, guided by drone spotters, placed shells within meters of their intended targets. Hegemony command posts, communication centers, and weapons depots disappeared in carefully controlled explosions. The enemy tried to respond, but their communications were down and their leaders were dead or scattered. Individual units fought bravely but without coordination. They were facing something they had never encountered, a military machine that functioned as a single organism. Sergeant Maya Lopez led her squad through the streets of the first city. The urban combat techniques they had practiced for years served them well. They moved building by building, room by room, eliminating enemy resistance while protecting civilians. "Contact front," shouted one of her soldiers. A hegemony heavy weapons team had set up in a school building, using children as shields. Lopez studied the situation through her tactical display. The enemy position was strong, but they had made one crucial mistake. They were focused on the street, not watching the buildings around them. "Johnson, can you get to the roof across the street?" "Already there, Sergeant." "On my mark, put a smoke grenade through their window." "Adams, I need close air support on standby." The coordinated attack lasted 30 seconds. Smoke filled the enemy position. Johnson's team entered from above, and Lopez's squad rushed the building from 2 directions. The hegemony soldiers surrendered rather than face certain death. The children were unharmed. Similar scenes played out across the planet. Human forces used their technological advantage and superior training to conduct precise operations that minimized civilian casualties while destroying enemy capability. Captain Garcia watched from the command center, amazed by what he was seeing. The humans fought with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural. Every unit knew where every other unit was located. Artillery support arrived exactly when needed. Airstrikes hit their targets with perfect accuracy. "How do you do it?" he asked Wright. "How do you coordinate so many different elements?" Wright pointed to the tactical display showing the entire battle in real time. "Practice, Captain. We've been fighting wars for thousands of years. We've learned how to make all the pieces work together. But the coalition has had longer to develop their technology. Technology isn't everything. Doctrine matters more. Training matters more. Understanding how to use your tools effectively matters more than having the best tools." By the end of the second day, organized hegemony resistance had collapsed. Small groups of enemy soldiers still held scattered positions, but they were cut off and surrounded. The outcome was no longer in doubt. The real surprise came when human forces began taking prisoners. Despite their overwhelming tactical superiority, the humans followed strict rules of engagement. Wounded enemies received medical care regardless of species. Civilians were protected and evacuated to safe areas. Admiral Zeftai landed with a coalition observation team to witness the aftermath. He walked through streets that had been battlefields just hours before. Human soldiers were distributing food to civilians while medics treated the wounded. "I don't understand," Zeftai said to Wright. "Your forces could have simply destroyed everything. Why show restraint?" Wright looked at the alien commander with tired eyes. The battle had been won, but he had still lost good soldiers in the fighting. "Admiral, humans learned something long ago. Winning the war isn't enough. You have to be able to live with yourself afterward. We're not monsters. We're soldiers. There's a difference." The final hegemony stronghold fell on the 3rd day. The enemy commander surrendered rather than watch his remaining troops be systematically eliminated. by an enemy they couldn't match. As coalition forces arrived to begin relief operations, Wright received a priority transmission from Earth. Admiral Stone's voice came through clearly despite the distance. Colonel, excellent work on Xerion 7. However, intelligence indicates this was just the beginning. The hegemony has major operations planned for at least 6 other systems. Wright looked out at his soldiers, tired but victorious. They had shown the galaxy what professional military forces could accomplish. But this was just the first battle in what could be a long war. Understood, Admiral. The 5th Brigade is ready for whatever comes next. Around the galaxy, news of the Xerion 7 operation spread quickly. For the first time in millennia, a major military victory had been achieved with minimal civilian casualties. The humans had done something the Coalition thought impossible. They had fought a clean war, but more importantly, they had shown that professional soldiers could be both deadly and humane. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humans weren't just another warrior species. They were something far more dangerous and far more valuable. Professional guardians of peace. News of the Xerion 7 victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Dr. Rachel Morgan found herself in an unusual position, trying to explain human military capabilities to Coalition leaders who couldn't quite believe what they had witnessed. The meeting took place on the Coalition capital world of Centralis, in a chamber that held representatives from all 47 member species. Morgan stood at the center, surrounded by beings who had never seen real warfare until the hegemony attacks began. Dr. Morgan, asked High Counselor Velnara, how is it possible that 3,000 human soldiers accomplished what 30,000 Coalition troops could not? Morgan activated a holographic display showing human military doctrine. The answer lies in how we approach warfare itself. Coalition forces fight like they're trying to arrest criminals. Human forces fight like they're trying to win a war. But surely the principles are the same. Not at all. Police work focuses on capturing suspects with minimal violence. Military operations focus on destroying the enemy's ability and will to fight. Morgan highlighted tactical examples from the recent battle. Human soldiers trained constantly in combined arms tactics. Infantry, armor, artillery, and air support all work together as one coordinated system. A bird-like Ethon representative raised a wing. This coordination you speak of, how do you achieve it? Practice. Human military forces have been developing these techniques for thousands of years. Every generation of soldiers builds on the knowledge of those who came before. Morgan paused. But more importantly, we understand that warfare is both an art and a science. Meanwhile, on the training world of Kepler 186F, Major Chris Rodriguez was learning just how difficult it was to teach military tactics to species that had evolved without predators. Coalition soldiers from 6 different worlds struggled with concepts that seemed basic to human thinking. Remember, Rodriguez called to a mixed unit of alien troops. When you advance, you need to provide covering fire for your teammates. Watch each other's backs. A massive Gorlak soldier looking like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros raised his hand. Major Rodriguez, this seems unnecessarily aggressive. Why not simply announce our presence and request surrender? Rodriguez sighed. He had been having this conversation for 3 weeks. Because the enemy won't surrender just because you ask nicely. They're trying to kill you. Your job is to stop them before they succeed. The training exercises were initially disastrous. Coalition soldiers moved too slowly, telegraphed their intentions, and hesitated at crucial moments. Their minds simply didn't process conflict the same way human minds did. But slowly, progress emerged. The more aggressive species adapted faster than others. The predator-evolved races understood competition and conflict instinctively. It was the peaceful herbivores who struggled most. Back on Centralis, Dr. Morgan continued her briefings with Coalition leadership. She had discovered something disturbing in the intelligence reports that Captain Garcia had been gathering. High Counselor, Morgan said, we've been analyzing captured hegemony communications. This isn't a random rebellion. It's a coordinated campaign that's been planned for years. What do you mean? The hegemony has been studying Coalition military weaknesses systematically. They know exactly how your forces respond to different threats. They've been preparing for this war while everyone else assumed peace would continue forever. Admiral Zeftai ruffled his feathers nervously. Are you suggesting this was inevitable? I'm suggesting that someone has been playing a very long game. The hegemony knew that coalition forces wouldn't adapt quickly to real warfare. They counted on your reluctance to accept casualties. Meanwhile, Lieutenant Sam Johnson's reconnaissance teams had uncovered evidence of something far more troubling: hidden bases in asteroid fields, massive shipyards building warships in secret, weapon stockpiles that could devastate entire star systems. Johnson crouched in the shadows of a hegemony facility, recording everything his sensors could detect. The enemy had been preparing for total war on a scale that dwarfed anything the coalition had imagined. "Command, this is Recon 7. He whispered into his communicator. "You need to see this. The facility here isn't just a military base. It's a weapons manufacturing center. They're mass-producing antimatter warheads." Colonel Wright received the intelligence report with growing alarm. The hegemony wasn't just trying to conquer a few systems. They were planning to destroy the coalition entirely. "Get me Admiral Stone," Wright ordered, "and prepare a full intelligence briefing for Coalition Command. They need to understand what they're really facing." The briefing took place in the Coalition's most secure facility. Admiral Stone attended via hologram from his flagship, while Wright presented the evidence in person. "Ladies and gentlemen," Wright began, "we're not dealing with a conventional military threat. The hegemony has been preparing for genocide." The room fell silent as Wright displayed the intelligence his teams had gathered: weapons capable of cracking planets, biological warfare agents designed to target specific species, plans for the systematic extermination of coalition worlds. The Zerion 7 operation wasn't the war. Wright continued. It was a test. They wanted to see how we would respond, how effective our forces would be. Now they know. High Counselor Velnara's aquatic form trembled in its mobility suit. "What are you saying, Colonel?" "I'm saying that everything changes now. This isn't about territory or resources. The hegemony wants to exterminate every species that doesn't join them voluntarily." Wright's expression was grim. "They're what happens when one of your peaceful species decides that peace is weakness." The implications hit the coalition representatives like a physical blow. For 2,000 years, they had lived in a galaxy where conflicts were resolved through diplomacy and compromise. The concept of an enemy that wanted total victory was alien to them. "What do we do?" asked Admiral Zeftai. "We prepare for real war," Wright replied. "Not police actions. Not peacekeeping missions, war." Dr. Morgan stepped forward. "The coalition needs to understand something about human military history. We didn't become warriors because we enjoyed violence. We became warriors because sometimes violence is the only way to protect what matters. But the casualties will be far worse if we lose," Wright said bluntly. "The hegemony isn't interested in ruling you. They want to replace you. Every civilian who dies in battle is one more than the coalition has lost in 2 millennia. But every civilian who dies because we weren't strong enough to protect them is a failure of our duty." Captain Garcia, who had been silent during most of the briefing, finally spoke up. "What do you need from us?" "Everything," Wright replied. "We need coalition worlds to start producing military equipment. We need your best students to train as soldiers. We need your governments to accept that some things are worth fighting for." High Counselor Velnara processed this slowly. "You're asking us to become like you, to embrace warfare as a necessary tool." "I'm asking you to embrace the reality that peace requires guardians," Wright corrected. "Humans learned this lesson the hard way, over thousands of years of conflict. The galaxy can learn it faster, but only if you're willing to change." The meeting ended with the formation of the Galactic Defense Force, a joint military organization that would combine coalition resources with human training and doctrine. It was the first time in galactic history that a truly unified military command had been established. As the representatives filed out, Admiral Zeftai approached Wright privately. "Colonel, I must ask, when this war is over, what happens to all these weapons? All these soldiers? Will humans become the galaxy's new masters?" Wright looked at the alien officer with understanding. It was a reasonable fear. History was full of liberators who became conquerors. "Admiral, humans have been asking ourselves that question for centuries. The answer is simple. We don't want to rule anyone. We just want to go home when the job is done." Wright paused. "The price of freedom is eternal vigilance. We're willing to pay that price, but we'd prefer to share it with friends." As coalition worlds began their transformation from peaceful societies to wartime economies, the hegemony was preparing its own response. They had learned from Zerion 7 that humans were dangerous enemies. Their next attack would be designed to eliminate the human threat permanently. The galaxy was about to discover that when professional soldiers are backed into a corner, they don't surrender. They fight harder. The final battle began in the hegemony's core systems, where Admiral Kevin Stone's fleet faced an enemy armada that stretched beyond the horizon of space. 10,000 hegemony warships had gathered for what their leaders called the final cleansing. They planned to destroy the human fleet and then move on to burn coalition worlds too. Stone stood on the bridge of his flagship Defender, studying the tactical display with calm eyes. His fleet numbered barely 1,000 ships, including coalition vessels with crews trained by human instructors. By any reasonable calculation, they were about to be destroyed. "Admiral," called Captain Nicole Adams from her fighter command station, "enemy forces are moving into attack formation. They're not showing any coordination beyond basic group tactics." "Just as we expected," Stone replied. "They're still fighting like a mob. A very large mob, but a mob nonetheless." Colonel Danny Wright had brought the 5th Brigade aboard the fleet for the ground assault that would follow the space battle. If there was a ground assault, first they had to survive what was coming. "Admiral Stone," Wright said quietly, "my people are ready, but we need you to get us to the surface." Stone nodded. "We'll get you there, Colonel." "That's a promise." The hegemony fleet attacked in waves exactly as human intelligence had predicted. They came forward in massive groups, relying on overwhelming firepower to crush their enemies. It was a tactic that had worked against coalition forces who fought as individual ships. But the human fleet didn't fight as individual ships. They fought as a coordinated system. "All units implement Formation Delta," Stone ordered. "Concentrate fire on designated targets." The human ships moved like dancers, each vessel knowing exactly where every other vessel would be. They created overlapping fields of fire that turned space into a killing ground for enemy ships that tried to advance. Captain Garcia, serving as Coalition Fleet Coordinator, watched in amazement as human tactics turned a hopeless battle into something that might actually be winnable. "How are you doing this?" he asked Stone. "Your ships are outnumbered 10-1. "Individual ships don't matter," Stone explained. "Fleet coordination matters. The enemy has 10 times our numbers, but they're fighting 10,000 separate battles. We're fighting one battle with 1,000 ships." The difference was devastating. Hegemony ships charged forward and died by the hundreds. Human vessels took losses too, but they made every shot count. Coalition ships, following human tactical doctrine, performed far better than they ever had before. Captain Adams led her fighter squadrons in complex attack patterns that confused enemy targeting systems. The human pilots flew like they were extensions of their machines, diving through enemy formations and striking critical targets before disappearing into the chaos of battle. But the real surprise came from the coalition pilots who had trained under human instructors. They had learned to think like predators instead of prey. Their attacks were coordinated, precise, and lethal. On the ground, the battle was equally intense. Wright's forces conducted the galaxy's first large-scale combined arms assault in over 2,000 years. Human doctrine called for integrating infantry, armor, artillery, and air support into one seamless system. Sergeant Maya Lopez led her squad through urban combat that would have been familiar to soldiers from any human war. Buildings provided cover and concealment. Streets became kill zones. Every intersection was a potential ambush site. But Lopez's squad wasn't alone. They were part of a larger system that included tank support, artillery backup, and close air support. When they encountered strong resistance, they called for help and received it within minutes. Lieutenant Sam Johnson's reconnaissance teams provided real-time intelligence on enemy movements. His soldiers moved like ghosts through the battlefield, marking targets for precision strikes and guiding friendly forces around enemy strongpoints. The coalition soldiers fighting alongside human units performed beyond everyone's expectations, including their own. Species that had never known war learned to fight with skill and courage that amazed their instructors. Major Chris Rodriguez watched a mixed unit of human and coalition. Soldiers worked together to clear a fortified building. The aliens had learned human tactical principles, but they brought their own unique capabilities to the fight. The massive Gorlak soldiers proved nearly unstoppable in close combat. The bird-like Ethons provided aerial reconnaissance that no human could match. The aquatic Nereids excelled in amphibious operations. They're not trying to be human soldiers, Rodriguez realized. They're becoming something new. Coalition soldiers with human training. But the hegemony leadership had one final card to play. Faced with inevitable defeat, they activated weapons of mass destruction aimed at civilian populations. If they couldn't rule the galaxy, they would destroy it. "Colonel Wright," came the urgent transmission from Fleet Command. "Enemy forces are targeting civilian centers with antimatter warheads. Estimated casualties in the millions if those weapons launch." Wright looked at his tactical display. The weapons sites were heavily defended and located in urban areas. Any assault would result in significant casualties for his forces. But the alternative was genocide on an unimaginable scale. "All units prepare for immediate assault on WMD sites. We're accepting the casualties to prevent a much larger tragedy." It was the kind of decision that defined professional soldiers. Wright understood the mathematics of warfare. Sometimes accepting smaller losses prevented much larger ones. It was a calculation that coalition leaders still struggled with, but one that human military commanders had been making for millennia. The assault on the weapon sites was costly, but successful. Human soldiers died stopping weapons that would have killed millions of civilians. It was a trade that they made without hesitation, because they understood their duty. The war ended not with the hegemony's destruction, but with their surrender. Their leadership, faced with the systematic elimination of their military capability, chose capitulation over annihilation. Wright stood in the ruins of the hegemony command center, accepting the surrender of an enemy that had planned to commit genocide. Around him, the sounds of battle were fading as the last resistance collapsed. "Why?" asked the hegemony commander, a reptilian being whose species had once been apex predators. "Why show mercy to those who would have shown you none?" Wright looked at the alien with tired eyes. The campaign had cost him good soldiers, friends who would never see home again. But that was the price of wearing the uniform. "Because that's what separates soldiers from killers," Wright replied. "We fight to protect, not to destroy. We fight to preserve civilization, not to replace it with chaos." The formal surrender ceremony took place before the Coalition Assembly. Representatives from all member worlds witnessed Wright's address to the galaxy. "You asked us what a human professional army truly was," Wright said, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. "We're not just soldiers. We're the guardians of peace trained in war. We're what stands between civilization and those who would destroy it." Wright paused, looking out at the assembled representatives. Species that had known only peace for millennia, now learning the price of that peace. "We're what you become when you love peace enough to fight for it, when you understand that freedom isn't free, and that sometimes the cost must be paid in blood." His voice grew quieter, more personal. "We're what you become when you realize that the alternative to having guardians is having masters." The establishment of the Galactic Defense Force marked a new era in galactic history. For the first time in over 2,000 years, the galaxy had a military force capable of defending civilization against those who would destroy it. Dr. Rachel Morgan's final report on the war noted the profound change in galactic society. Coalition species had learned that peace wasn't the absence of conflict. Peace was the presence of those willing and able to defend it. "The galaxy has discovered something humans learned long ago," Morgan wrote. "The price of peace is eternal vigilance, and sometimes that vigilance requires those who are prepared to pay the ultimate price." Colonel Wright returned to Earth with his surviving soldiers, their mission complete. The galaxy was safe, not because there were no more threats, but because there were those prepared to face them. As the transport ship entered Earth's atmosphere, Wright looked back toward the stars. The galaxy slept peacefully tonight, and would continue to sleep peacefully, because professional soldiers stood watch. That, he reflected, was what a human professional army truly was. Not conquerors or killers, but guardians. Not seekers of war, but preservers of peace. Not masters of the galaxy, but its protectors. The galaxy would remember the lesson, and it would endure.